Hey guys, it's Saga, and in this video we are going to take a very detailed look at the cameras on this Nothing Phone 1. I did not mention anything about the cameras on this Nothing Phone 1 in my initial impressions video because I wanted to save all my thoughts for this video. For all you GCAM enthusiasts, I am going to include quite a few comparison shots with and without the GCAM mod installed in various lighting conditions, so make sure to watch the complete video if you don't want to miss that out. Without wasting any more time, let us check out the specs of the cameras that we are working with. Nothing Phone 1 comes with two cameras on its back. Primary camera gets a 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor with f1.9 aperture, 24mm lens and optical image stabilization. The secondary camera gets yet another 50 megapixel sensor, and this one is Samsung's JN1 sensor with f2.2 aperture and 114° ultra-wide angle lens. This ultra-wide angle camera also gets macro shooting capabilities, so these dual cameras actually act like a triple camera setup. You can shoot 4K 30fps and 1080p 30 and 60fps videos with both these cameras. The HDR shooting mode is only available for 1080p 30fps videos. At the front, there is a 16 megapixel Sony IMX471 sensor with f2.45 aperture. If this sensor sounds familiar, then that's because it was OnePlus's favorite sensor for the front-facing camera for about 3 years. Despite of all these megapixels, it can only shoot videos at a maximum resolution of 1080p 30fps. Since this is a new phone, let us have a look at its camera interface. It seems like a very basic camera app. Like most of the other phones, you can swipe to the left or right to switch modes, tap on these three circles above the shutter button to switch between different lenses, and tap on this arrow at the top or swipe down anywhere on the screen to get to these extra features. You will find a few more shooting modes like time-lapse, macro and expert under this mode tab. The expert mode will let you change the exposure, ISO, shutter speed, white balance, focus and lenses according to your liking. The range for ISO is from 100 to 6400 and the range for shutter speed is from 1/8000th of a second all the way up to 32 seconds. With that, let us move on to the image and video samples from these cameras. Let us start with the images which I took during the daytime. It's rainy season in India, so I don't have any image samples in bright sunny lighting conditions, but the ones that I have should still give you a pretty good idea of how these cameras perform in various lighting conditions. These are some of the shots in fairly even daytime conditions, and you can see that the main camera can capture a lot of details in these conditions. I really liked this particular shot. It was very windy, and these flowers were moving all around the place, but the Nothing Phone 1 did really well to freeze the frame without any motion blur. This shot looks good at a first glance, but if you look a bit closer, everything in this shot looks a bit softer and there is also some noise in it. Now, although it's a 50 megapixel sensor, these are 12 megapixel binned images from the main camera. I think this image sensor and the Nothing's processing is doing a fairly good job considering all of these images are being shot in diffuse lighting conditions. If these images look so good, I'm sure the ones in bright sunny lighting conditions will look much better. Unlike the previous OnePlus phones, this phone doesn't suffer from overexposed images, so you don't have to worry about adjusting the exposure manually. You might have noticed that these images are looking very natural and well balanced. Colors are not overly saturated and the contrast is just right. In short, in most of these images, the colors are exactly how they looked in real life. Well, emphasis on the word most of the shots, because in others, the colors look messed up. This is how the Nothing Phone 1 captured the colors of this wall. And now, here is how the iPhone 13 captured it. And just so that there should be no confusion, the actual color of the wall is exactly how it looks in iPhone's image. Coming to the HDR shots, again, most of these images look good. The phone is particularly good at handling the brighter areas and not letting them blow out when the HDR is turned on. But at the same time, it is not that good at handling the darker parts of the scene. More often than not, it will just crush the shadows instead of bringing them up even when the HDR mode is turned on. While these images don't look bad or anything like that, but as we will see later on in the video, this is one of the areas where the GCAM makes a big difference. Before we check out the close-up shots, here is a quick focusing speed test from the main camera. As you can see, it is fast at setting and switching the focus from near to a far object. This shift in focus is abrupt and not smooth. This doesn't matter too much while taking images, but it doesn't look very natural while shooting videos. Actual close-up shots from the main camera look really good. The main subject, which is the doll in this shot, and the mouse on the brake in this one is in perfect sharp focus and the background is blurred out. The minimum focusing distance on this main camera is good, which means you can get really close to your subject for taking these images. This lens has a huge sensor behind it, and adding wide f1.9 aperture on top of it will help you get this amazingly smooth bokeh in the background. The wide lens gets macro capabilities, so if you switch to the macro mode, you can get as close as 4 cm to the subject and still set the focus. While these images look good, I don't really consider them to be macro shots. I mean, we have seen much better macro cameras which lets us get so much more closer to the subject in phones priced much lower than this. Now this is one of the macro shots from the wide lens, and for the most part it looks good. But now look at this shot. Doesn't it look much better? It's not a macro shot. This is a 1.5x digitally zoomed in shot from the main camera. I did this with a few more images and you can see the result for yourself. The point is, if you want to get very close to your subject, zoom in digitally on the image from the main sensor and that image will look much better than the macro shot. If you have liked this video so far, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, you won't miss out on any of the amazing videos coming up on this channel. This is how much of the scene the 24mm lens on the main camera lets you get in the shot. And this is how much more of the scene the wide lens will let you get in the shot by standing at the same spot. The wide lens also gets a 50MP sensor behind it, but these are again 12MP binned images. This lens comes in handy when you want to capture more of the scene and you don't have any space to move back, or when you want to capture a different perspective of the scene by standing at the same spot. I'm not sure if you noticed this, but if you look at the wide angle shots, you can easily tell that there is extra processing being added to these images, which makes them look very sharp and unnatural. Even the colors don't look natural in these wide shots, and they are far away from the colors of the main camera. These images are so sharp that ones from the normal camera seem to be softer in comparison. These wide shots also show distortion and artifacting towards the edges. I am not a fan of the extra sharp look of these wide shots, but that doesn't mean they don't look good. It depends on your preference. All of these were 12MP shots from both the cameras, and now let us compare them with the 50MP ones. At a first look, you won't see any difference in the amount of details in these shots, but you will definitely notice the 12MP shots showing better dynamic range. The sky in the 50MP images is just overexposed. You will see the same thing in this next set of images. The dynamic range is better in the 12MP shots, but as you zoom in, you can see much more details in the 50MP ones. These are cloudy conditions, so the 50MP shots are not showing as many details as they would in bright sunny lighting conditions. That brings me to another point. If the lighting conditions are less than ideal, or let's say if they are not sunny, then you won't see a lot more details in the 50MP shots compared to the 12MP ones. The high resolution shots will also show more noise in them. So if the lighting conditions are like this, or if it is night time, it is best to take images in the default 12MP mode. That being said, if you want to capture some landscape or architecture, or if you want to zoom in on a particular part of an image later on, then you can switch to the 50MP mode. The wide camera can also take 50MP shots, and again we see them overexposing the sky, while the 12MP ones are showing better dynamic range. Just like with the main camera, there are more details in the 50MP wide shots, and these shots don't look overly sharp or too processed, which is a good thing. But again, if the lighting conditions are cloudy, or basically if the light is anything less than ideal, it is best to stick to the 12MP binned mode for wide shots as well. Coming to the portrait shots. I am aware that most people don't use this mode, but I take over 70% of my images in this mode, so the portrait mode on any phone is very important to me. Nothing Phone 1 does really well in this department. It detects the edges quickly and accurately and does a great job of separating the subject from its background. You have the option of adjusting the aperture value or the blur to the background. I feel you get the most natural looking portrait shots when the aperture or the f-stop number is set to around f5.6. Colors and contrast in these portrait shots look good and natural, subject is sharp and the background blur looks very natural. I am very impressed with the portrait shots from this phone, but there is always scope for improvement, and if nothing could work out on the blur roll-off, these images would look even better. What I mean by blur roll-off is, right now we could see a hard line separating the in-focus subject and out-of-focus background, which is a dead giveaway for a trained eye that this is a smartphone's image. If this is fine-tuned a bit in image processing, the portrait shots could look much more natural. Again, I know I am one of the very few people who do this, but I also like to take portrait shots of objects. This is the easiest way to separate your subject from the background and emphasize it, and it also separates your image from rest of the average looking ones. Most of the phones are better at detecting the edges of objects than they are at detecting the edges of people. But in Nothing's case, I think they need to work a bit on the edge detection in these cases. These portraits still look really good, but if the edge detection is tuned a bit, they can turn out to be so much better. With that, let us move on to the images which are to be in artificial and lower lighting conditions. For taking good low light shots, a camera needs a big enough image sensor, wide aperture, OIS to help the sensor gather more light for a longer time, and a very good image processing pipeline. Nothing Phone 1 gets all of this, and that's the reason we see such good images from it in artificially lit conditions. Yes, granted that there is a lot of ambient and artificial light in these scenes, but there are a few phones in this price range which still won't be able to produce such clean looking images. Some noise starts being introduced in the images as we move to even lower light, but nothing is doing well to keep it under control, at least in these lighting conditions. But for some reason, this phone starts making everything look a bit softer in such low light. When the light gets even lower, you will have to be very careful while taking images. In these lighting conditions, the sensor wants to capture as much light as possible, so shutter is kept open for slightly longer, and if you move your phone during this time or if your hands are shaking, then the images will turn out all blurry. Just be aware of this and your shots will be really good even in lower lighting conditions from any phone, not just from the Nothing Phone 1. If you feel the details or the amount of light is not enough in these images, you can turn on the night mode and it makes the images even better. You can see for yourself the amount of light and the extra details that the night mode brings in these shots. I have observed that the darker the scene, the better the results are with the night mode. But again, this mode keeps the shutter open for 3 to 4 seconds, so you will have to hold your phone as steady as possible during that time, and only then your images will turn out this good. For best night mode results, place your phone on a tripod or rest it against something. The wide lens doesn't perform that well in lower light, but turning on the night mode makes its images somewhat usable. This mode also adds a lot of artificial sharpness to these images, making it look a lot processed. I don't know about you guys, but I really don't like this look, so I just refrained myself from using this lens after the sun went down. Now coming to the front facing camera. We get a 16 megapixel selfie camera and these images look fairly detailed. I like that Nothing did not go with a 32 megapixel selfie camera and not live up to the hype. This is a tried and trusted 16 megapixel sensor. It has been out for a while and we have seen countless phones deliver good results with it. As you can see, there are a lot of details in these selfies. I just think that the colors are a bit muted. The selfies don't look bad, but if the skin tones could be improved with a few updates, it would be so much better. The edge detection is really good in the portrait selfies. The software on this phone is really good at detecting the faces and separating them from the background. Again, I feel the skin tones, overall colors and dynamic range of these portrait shots should have been better. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the Nothing Phone 1. You can see how it handles the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I'm walking around with it. Sadly, this camera is limited at shooting 1080p videos and I don't think there is any kind of stabilization here. For the videos, both the rear cameras can shoot 4K 30fps videos. These videos look really good and thankfully OIS and EIS is working together to make the videos look stable. Now these are very overcast conditions, so you might see some noise in certain areas, but in good light, these videos look excellent. Even the wide lens is capable of shooting 4K videos and even without OIS, its videos are looking really good. If we take a closer look at these videos from the main camera, we see that there are a few jitters with each step even when the stabilization is turned on. This doesn't look very natural, but I think it is something which can be fixed via a software update. So all in all, I would say Nothing seems to have done a fairly good job with the cameras on this phone. Now let us see if installing a GCAM mod helps us improve these images any further. Now here are a few of the images which I shot with the GCAM app and stock app compared side by side. At a first look, image from the stock camera app might seem more appealing as it is brighter, but in reality, that image has a magenta tint over it, while the one from the GCAM is showing the actual color of the wall. In this set of images, you can clearly see that the stock camera app is having a green tint in it, while GCAM is again capturing natural looking colors. I did not have the HDR mode turned on in this and the previous image from the GCAM. But for the next images, I have turned on the HDR enhanced mode on the GCAM app and you can clearly see that it did a better job with the shadows in this shot, while the stock camera app almost crushed it. For this shot as well, the GCAM brought back so much more details on the shadows, while the stock camera app is only handling the brighter area as well and the shadows are being crushed. In all of these images, there are also more details in the shots on the GCAM, which you can see as I zoom in on this shot. I could have added a lot more GCAM shots, but you will see a similar thing in all of them. So if you have a working GCAM mod installed on this Nothing Phone 1, you can take better images with it in some conditions and the colors will also be more natural. But there are a few issues with the GCAM mod. First, it is not available on the Google Play Store to directly install it. You need to find and install an APK file. And I know this for a fact that many people are reluctant at doing so on their phone. And second, finding a good and working GCAM mod in itself is a very difficult task. There is a lot of trying and testing involved. Some mods fail to install on a phone, some crash or don't open, and on a few which do open, some of the features might not work or the resulting images might not be that different compared to the stock camera app. So you will have to tweak the settings of the app yourself or try another GCAM mod. All of this sounds too confusing, and that is one of the reasons most people either haven't heard about it or don't want to try it on their phone. If you plan on getting the Nothing Phone 1, then you should know that its cameras are really good by itself. And if you are interested, then installing a GCAM mod can make it even better. Now when I say that these cameras are good, you should know that I mean in its price range. Don't expect it to go and perform better than some of the flagship phones. Keep your expectations in check and everything will be fine. Nothing actually promised to deliver flagship level cameras, and in typical OnePlus fashion, it fell short of the claims in the camera department. I mean, it's not bad, but these cameras are definitely not as good as their founder wanted us to believe. All that being said, I'm pleasantly surprised with the cameras on this phone. While I don't like the ultra-wide camera that much, I feel the main camera does most of the heavy lifting and it delivers good results in most lighting conditions. I just hope nothing keeps on improving it further with software updates. What do you guys feel about the cameras on this Nothing Phone 1, and which other phone would you like me to compare its cameras with? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.